Welcome to this Forever Living Products special training entitled Nutrition from the Hive. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Bill Lewis and I'll be your host. With me is Holly Stout. Holly is our Director of Product Development. She's been a part of the beauty and fashion industry for a little over 25 years. 14 of those years has been in network marketing. She's developed skincare, hair care, cosmetics, and food supplements for global markets, and has traveled the world giving training seminars. She recently joined the Forever family to help drive our product development into the future. Those of you who attended our Forever experience last month had the opportunity of learning from Holly and experienced the firsthand tremendous knowledge that she's got, the practical information that she's shared with us. If you have any questions, there's a field in your control panel where you can submit them. At the end of the presentation, we'll address as many as time permits. It's now my pleasure to turn the mic over to Holly Stout. Holly, are you there?
Hi, Bill. I am. Wonderful. Thank you so much for a great introduction. I am so excited to be able to do this presentation today. As some of you may have met me, I am quite passionate about our Forever products, and I'm learning every day. As Bill mentioned, I'm a new member to the Forever family, but not so new to this industry, and definitely not new to the world of health and wellness. Something I'm very passionate about, something I'd like to do to help inspire our FBOs and to help create more health for more people. We're going to go ahead and begin today, and we're going to learn about the bee products featured here at Forever Living. We're going to start with describing the colonies of the bees. Now, many of you have heard this before. This is not going to be new information for some of you who have been around for a long time, but that said, you are definitely going to hear some new things because science evolves and technology evolves, and we're learning constantly about this amazing thing called the beehive. You know, the beehive is really kind of one of nature's greatest and sweetest gifts because it's such a multitasking functional area that it's interesting to recognize that it's probably one of the most efficient and highly operative places in the world. You know, there's really no doubt that if a bee were to be studied, they would really show a high development for organizational behavior and teamwork. And although hives are really about only 4 feet tall, they generate some of nature's most nutritive and impressive offerings. The humble honeybee, and I say humble strategically because, let's face it, they're bees, but they are so miraculous. These bees live a very full life, and they do amazing things. And that leads us to exactly where I was going. We're going to talk about all our bee products, as I mentioned today. So we're going to talk about aloe propolis cream, the bee honey, our bee pollen, the Forever Royal Jelly, and Forever Bee Propolis. But in order to understand what makes these products so amazing and so great for the body is to really understand and back up a little bit about how they're made. So we're going to first talk about where all the magic happens and who is responsible in the hive. As I mentioned, a hive is usually only about 4 feet tall, but it is a completely self-contained environment, a self-contained city, if you will. And it's made up of many different bees that perform different roles within the hive. So we're going to talk about the queens, the drones, and the workers, which really do the majority of the work. So the queens, and this is in the average bee colony, there's one queen, and it's a fertile queen, and her main activity is egg laying. That is it. The drones are anywhere between 300 and 800 in their population. These are fertile males, and their sole role is just that, to fertilize the queen. Then we have the workers, and this is truly the people who make it, or the bees rather, that make it happen. The workers are anywhere in the number of 20 to 80,000, and these are sterile female worker bees, and they make up over 98% of the colony's population. In addition to this, to the queens, the drones, and the workers, there are also about between 5,000 eggs and 25 to 30,000 immature bees in various stages of their development, up in upwards of which 10,000 have newly hatched. That's 10,000 life forms that need nurturing and constant supervision until they're ready to leave the hive. So you can imagine this is a massive colony where there's a lot of activities and a lot of responsibilities. So, as we've talked about the queens and the drones roles, the workers have a myriad of roles. So in the very first 2 to 3 weeks of an adult life, this worker bee is considered to be a house bee. And she's responsible for cleaning the hive and the comb. She's responsible for feeding the brood. The brood is the newly hatched and also the eggs that exist in the hive. She's responsible for caring for the queen. She makes orientation flights, meaning she orients herself to the outdoor environment of the hive and how to source food. She builds the combs. She ventilates the hive. And she also assists in packing the pollen, the water, the nectar, and all the honey into the combs. So she's got a huge task load right up front as far as housekeeping goes. But then the bees begin to split off and they begin to vary the tasks, and you'll have bees that kind of take guard duty, if you will. The guard bee has the duty of inspecting all incoming collectors by smelling their odor. And we're going to talk about the hive and how amazingly sustained it is. But the guard duties are fierce, and they do not let anything that smells suspicious pass the door of the hive. And we'll also note during mating season that really there are more than one guard bee that's guarding the hive, because of course the queen is fertile and we're actually creating a new queen in the hive, and so we want to make sure that nothing bad gets in. Scout duty is really performed by certain bees who are trained to go out and locate food sources, and then they pass on the information to other bees by a series of dance-like movements. I thought this was so cool. What the bee does is she circles around and around, and she stamps her legs and she wags her abdomen, and sometimes she stretches. And in studies, we have learned that this is possibly to show the type of food she has found, and even have observed workers watching her to determine what she's indicating, and then they act accordingly. So we believe through science that different dances can show varying types of information to be passed on. So the scouts go, they find the food source, they come back, they do their dance, the worker bees observe, and then they get the message, and then they go out and act accordingly. I thought that was really neat. Collecting is a real specific task where once the food source is scouted, a bee in his full or in her full form, in her full high energy, then leaves and is actually out collecting. And they collect all of the pollen, the propolis, the nectar. They go out into the areas that the scouts have sourced, and they collect everything. And this collection starts as early as 5:15 a.m., and usually by 6:30 p.m., almost all of the bees have returned to the hive. So they work beyond an average workday of 8 to 5, but they absolutely perform some miraculous things when they're out and about. And you can imagine hundreds of thousands of bees out doing this exact thing and taking it back to the hive the way they instinctively know how to do. And then one of the most important functions of a worker bee is the nurse. And this is where all the larvae are fed during their first 3 days of life, and they're fed with either royal jelly, which we'll talk about in a little bit, or they're fed honey and pollen. Next, we're going to talk about our bee pollen, and this is one that I'm particularly passionate about simply because we're in the season where bee pollen can be of so much benefit. I've read a lot of news studies talking about allergies all across the United States and how this season particularly has been one high for seasonal allergies. When we hear the term busy as a bee, that's specifically talking about this product. So we're going to talk about what bee pollen is, how it's gathered, and what good it can do in the body. So pollen's been called a miracle food, and it's been called that for good reason because it's one of the most nutrient-dense materials in the world. As the field bees, or the worker bees, gather nectar from within the flowers, it also gathers pollen, or the male seed of the flower. And each bee pollen pellet contains over 2 million flower pollen grains, and 1 teaspoon can contain up to 2.5 billion grains of flower pollen. That's a lot of pollen. That's a lot of collecting in a day's work. So the bees combine the pollen with their own saliva and their nectar, and then they create small granules that we call bee pollen. Bee pollen is rich in protein, and it's loaded with amino acids, vitamins, minerals, enzymes, and coenzymes. And due to the high level of nutrition in bee pollen, world-class athletes have actually been known to use pollen to support their high-intensity training and performance. So with these 96 components of nutrients, it really becomes a nutrient powerhouse. You know, bees work all day at an amazing pace, and it also requires the nutritional support of pollen. So not only do they bring it back to the hive, but they use it to benefit in doing their own activities. So they use it to sustain the energy needed to perform their duties. And humans have also used pollen to provide natural energy stamina. In fact, it's such a great source of energy that, again, athletes will rely on this as part of their training. Weight management is another benefit that we can see with bee pollen, as well as stamina, which resorts to that energy. The bees use it to really sustain themselves throughout the day. And then for me, allergies. Huge issue for me. I've never had seasonal allergies until I moved to Arizona, and now I have them, and my family has them, and we've been taking the Forever Bee pollen, and we've experienced some great results. Allergies were studied at the University School of Medicine in Tokyo, and it was proven that that bee pollen can help support allergies through allergy season. We've also known through myriad of studies that bee pollen can actually help support healthy testosterone levels in men and also estrogen levels in postmenopausal women. So you can see this rich bee pollen from millions and millions of flowers and stems all over the world that they bring that back to the hive, and now we have bottled it, and you get to benefit as a forever living person who enjoys our products. Taking a little while to advance. There we go. As I mentioned with allergies and the University School of Medicine in Tokyo, this is really one of the true known benefits and the most scientific